Good morning, everyone. It's a Saturday morning, early, a little after 9 a.m. I wanted to give an update on where I'm at with this project here. Um, I've kind of been working on it a little bit the last few days. I kind of had to take a break yesterday and the day before that. But one of the changes I was working on um, after the last stream was redoing, excuse me, one of the changes I was doing was redoing the Waypoint system. Sorry about that audio. I think I got that kind of mixed up or cut off. Um, and so I was trying to redo the Waypoint system where it could work a little better with our enemy AI controller. We were experimenting with a Tiger model that had some animations with it. That seemed to be going pretty good. Um, but the, the way the current AI system was working, or the Waypoint system, is we would send our tiger to his first waypoint, and then the waypoint itself would take over and direct them on a path, to a very specific path. Um, and I believe we had it set where you just continue that path. You'd come back up to the top. Well, actually, you would stop. Um, and now one of the changes I did work on was to allow it to continue repeating that path over and over, so it can go in a continuous loop through the waypoint system. And I also added, if you see here on the right under the spawn enemy script component here of our enemy spawn, I added a starting and ending waypoint, so I can just drag those in, and I modified the code along with this repeat waypoints that shows up, and modified the code so that it would utilize that. And we could just drag in on the enemy spawn the starting waypoint and the ending waypoint, and then go from there, and then repeat whether it's going to repeat or not once it got to the end, which would bring it back to number 1 and circle around. In this case, we got 10 as the end, and 1. So I set up a new, for testing that, I set up a new waypoint path, which and I moved the waypoints out of the location A game object. I kept it under the terrain, which is our entire map for the island. And I moved it down here under something called map waypoints, and then I have these different ones I've been experimenting with. I've just been turning off the ones I don't want to have on in case I use the same names or all that. But ultimately, that's I can't keep creating these various groups. So anyways, let me show you what I did with the second group. I created a group of 10 waypoints. And let me turn on, I added this editor camera up here so that since we don't have a player out right now that can show that with his camera attached to him to show the map, how it's rendered in the game scene, I added this editor camera that I can just turn on. And it's set up where it's doing a top-down view. So as I click on these waypoints, we'll be able to see exactly where they're at. We may be too high up in order to see that. Let's see if I do this, if they'll show up. Let's go back to waypoint 1, 2. No. Probably have to do it in the scene. So let me alter direction of the scene. So we're kind of looking down here. Alright, so now if we zoom in. So if we click on waypoint 1, you see that's where waypoint 1 was set up. 2 over here, 3, 4, 5 inside there, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so forth. It's open. Sounded like somebody had knocked on the door. Okay. So we got 10 waypoints, and so I have this tiger set up where he's going. Obviously, let's go back to our tiger here. Well, not that. I was in the enemy spawn. Is what it was. There it is. So we have our tiger prefab, the enemy prefab. We're dropping in, starting waypoint, ending waypoint, repeating, and then I added sprint mode as well. The choices are walk, meaning they're going to walk the entire path, start to finish. I had a sprint where they're going to sprint that path. And now the way that sprint is set up is the first, once they reach that first waypoint, then they start sprinting. So they're going to walk from where they spawn up to that first waypoint. After that, they're going to a sprint mode all the way around up through the second to last waypoint, basically 9. When they would hit waypoint 9, they would slow down to a walk and then walk to number 10, which is their end. If the repeat waypoints is not checked, they'll stop and just wait for some other direction from the code we write. But if it is checked, which in most cases, if we're having enemies that are just roaming around in this world, we want them to continue in a loop. So that's checked. The reason I had that option on is I was thinking, we might want to utilize this waypoint system for enemies that go one place to the next. Maybe we again, I don't know exactly where it could be used, but I'm sure at some point, for example, if some kind of event occurred in the game, they might need to go from one point to the next, and maybe even like a call. Maybe when there's one of their fellow enemies, another tiger is being attacked. They can run to a certain point to group together in a pack and then attack that person. So I don't see it very useful in really with basic enemy AI, but I do see it being useful. The ability to go from point A to point B, or waypoint A to waypoint B, would be in player interaction. Sometimes they'll run into somebody and they'll say, hey, I'm gonna run, like you interact with another NPC player, or not another, but a NPC player, and you're going on a quest, for example, and part of the quest is that you need to go find something in some cave or whatever, like some kind of jewel or gem or a key or some kind of object, and then bring it to a certain person, or that same person you just spoke to, up in a different area, like a different town. And so when you leave for your little adventure going wherever they send you, the NPC you just spoke with could be set using a waypoint to go from where he's at now up to whatever that next location is, and then stop and wait for you to get there. So that's one scenario that I see it could be used in. I guess the functionality needs to be there because you never know when you're going to send an enemy as well from one location to another. In most cases, they're going to be patrolling an area, so you want them to loop through. And like I said, I had several waypoints that we set up, waypoint sets. But instead of having these multiple waypoint sets, well, I kind of want to organize them better. I'm kind of kicking around the idea, okay, do we create a waypoint and just put them all over the map and just have basically a waypoint grid? It's all over the map, and which could work. It'll work the same way, and then just drag and drop in starting and ending waypoints over here in the enemy spawn, and then that could work, but it would get awfully confusing just by the names of the waypoints. Like, okay, so let's say we get to waypoint 199, for example, or we have 200 waypoints. And so a start maybe waypoint 1, but maybe we want to stop is going to be like waypoint 186. I don't really know what waypoint 186 is, so it's very generic in that sense. So what I'm going to do is, start where I have this map waypoints over here. We're going to set up waypoint groups, and So for example, this way we'll just categorize them in the hierarchy here, something more meaningful. I mean, so if we specify, for example, if it's waypoint 9, but it's in the Trader Village group, for example, um, I could easily know that's where it's coming from, and I'll probably name the waypoints in some way, like there would be a prefix. I was thinking either like LA. We got our locations labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and all that. Maybe so the waypoint name would start with the location first. LA, for example, location A, or LB, waypoint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's definitely one thing I want to do, but also, there may be like sub waypoints areas within an area. So, I want to be able to classify that as well, and maybe another 2 characters to represent, the waypoints in a particular area, maybe. But anyways, there'll be something descriptive. I think they at least need to have, for now, again, because these names are not, as of right now, these names are not necessarily used in code, with the exception of a sorting algorithm I had to put together, a little sorting function, because one of the things I ran into was the function I had that would just get all the waypoints. Like I've designated these waypoints with a tag. Originally it was NPC waypoint. I changed to waypoint NPC because I wanted to make sure it was different than the first test that we did, to make sure. So I was getting some odd thing that was happening. It was the character kept running. We had the tiger set up here, the enemy tiger, and no matter what waypoint I set up, he would start running way out over here. He kept running out to the left, running out to the left. And I could not figure out why was he running that way. Even if I set it for waypoint 1, he was still running all the way over there. I don't know. Well, I kind of do know what happened. I was setting the index value to waypoint 1, or 0 if I wanted the first element. 1 was actually the second waypoint in the list that was generated when I used the function to find all game objects by tag and looking for waypoint, NPC waypoint at the time. Now it's waypoint NPC. And what was happening is Unity apparently doesn't return those objects back in the same order that you have them in your hierarchy here. I was under the impression that it might, because I know with rendering, from what I've read, is the rendering order is based on the way it appears in the hierarchy. So for example, waypoint 1, if you had slowed down the rendering process, waypoint 1 would be rendered before waypoint 2, or that game object would be instantiated or created waypoint 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so forth. So I made the assumption, and again, never assume, always confirm. I made the assumption, though, that because it renders in that order, that more than likely that it would have them in some kind of internal hierarchy in that particular same order. And so when I just called my function, I assumed that I was getting them all in the correct order. And so I couldn't actually, so once I discovered what was going on, because I started printing out the waypoint name that it was going to, then I sort of discovered, or didn't really discover that, I kind of made the assumption, wait a minute, maybe they're not in the right order. Maybe they're just coming in some random order. That one happens to be the first one that's showing up for whatever reason. And so what I wound up writing was a simple function, and it's based off, and this is what I was getting at, the names. I want to make them name independent right now. I think what we're going to add is a sort order to the actual waypoint. Like the waypoints themselves will have to become objects, not just a simple game object like this, but we're going to add a, as part of this waypoint thing here, we'll have another field here that we're going to set where we can specify, basically it's sort order, so that we can control, so when we do sort these internally in code, in the script, we'll know it's sorting the right way. But what I did in the meantime, because I was numbering these sequentially, and I knew the exact name, waypoint, I went ahead and wrote a sorting function that basically strips, gets does a for each loop. Once it gets all the game objects, it does a for each loop, and it'll evaluate each one. It'll extract out a substring which starts at the point after letter T in waypoint, so it gets the remaining portion after that, which would be numeric. It converts it to a number, and based on that number, then we sort it. So, and the way I'm sorting is I've got a loop going. I know we got a total number of waypoints. We do the find game objects. We'll obviously get a number of game objects in our array, and let's go ahead and bring that code up real quick. I think it was on the enemy spawn is where all that happens. And see, that's the other thing. I don't really like the fact that I've got to do all this in enemy spawn. It's not really the place for it, the enemy spawn script. The enemy spawn script should be just that. It should spawn the enemy, send it on its starting way, send it to its first waypoint, and that's pretty much it. Pass in the information it needs for the waypoint navigation, and then that should be the end of it. But anyway, so I may wind up taking this function and pulling it out. Let's scroll down to the bottom here. Okay, so in the get enemy waypoints, had to do a couple of things. First, create a waypoint list of type game object, an array actually, and so I'm looking for waypoint NPC. Anything tagged with waypoint NPC. So it gets that list. Now, the next thing you do is just create well, actually, it stores that and it returns it as an array of game objects. So, for some reason, you cannot. There's something about returning an array. You can't really do. You have to return a list. So, in order to get what I needed, the transform. So, I was trying to return back a list of transforms, and so. Let's see what we have here. Waypoints. Okay, and I have the waypoints defined as a list of transforms up at the top here. Let's go back here. Right here, we got a private list, transform waypoints. Okay, and so we've got all our waypoints. That's an empty list right now, and so I'm trying to get that list. And the key to it is getting a numerically sorted list. So when we have these, when we tell it to go to a certain waypoint, like waypoint number 1, for example, in the list, then we'll know that's actually going to the. And lists are zero base as well, so that's really the second element. But it's going to the it's going to the correct item. For some reason, waypoint 14 was showing up as the second one in the list if I didn't sort it. And so that's why when I told it to go to 1, it didn't make sense. No matter what I tried to do, it would go there, and that's what it wound up being. So without going over too much of this, so I create the temporary array WP list of game objects. I also create and that actually gets populated with all the waypoints in no sorted order, just whatever the way Unity returns it using this function. And so in here I create inside this function a temporary list variable, a list of game objects called goList. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm adding each waypoint from the WP list into the Go list, but I'm doing it in numerical order. And the way I'm doing that is I'm creating a for loop, which starts at 0, which is going to be our index 0 element. You know, it's the first element, 0, and it goes to the length of the WP list up here. And so if we have 10 waypoints, for example, that are labeled waypoint 1, their names are waypoint 1 through waypoint 10 in the hierarchy in the Unity editor. And so by doing the for loop from int I equals 0 to WP list.length, it'll iterate through 0 through 9. I will be 0 through 9 at any given time during that loop. And so here's what I'm doing. I'm creating a so we know we're going to iterate through the correct number of waypoint objects. We also created a variable outside this loop called num. And what num's going to be used for, we started at 0, and then as soon as it gets in the loop, we're going to increment it by 1. Num plus 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 will increment by 1 to get it to the name we're looking for. Well, up to the number. So number 1, basically waypoint 1 is what we're looking for. So num plus plus is the correct one. I probably could have used I and just added 1 to it. I could have I plus 1 here. If you see where I'm building, I'm going through this for for each iteration of the for loop here, which is going through 10 iterations here, 0 through 9. Within that, I'm actually searching the WP list and inspecting each game object by using this for each game object G and WP list. So I'm going through that entire list every iteration to find a match that matches the waypoint name that I set up here in sname. During the first iteration of this for loop, inside here, because num plus plus is 1 the first time, it's creating a string name of waypoint waypoint 1 is actually going to be an sname, waypoint 1. So by going through this for each loop on every game object, I'm basically looking for, okay, let's try to find waypoint 1, the actual name of this game object in the hierarchy in Unity. Let's see if g.name, which is going in this for each loop, g is the object that's created on each iteration of this for each loop that's nested inside this main for loop. So we're just going to do a comparison. If g.name is equal to sname, which is the one we created, then that means we've found a match. We've found waypoint 1, and so we want to add waypoint 1 to our new goal list, which is going to be the sorted list when this is all done. So we do goal list.add g. We just add that waypoint to the list. And then we break out of the for each loop here. A break statement only breaks out of the innermost, whatever, the loop, the closest loop that it's in. It's not going to break out of both loops. It only breaks out of the loop that it's currently in, whether it be a for each, a for, a while loop, whatever kind of loop you have. The keyword break will just cause execution of the code to come just outside here, really, and go to the next line after. So in this case, it's no line that loops back up and starts our for again. So after it does find waypoint 1, it'll break out, go up here, and do another iteration of the for loop up here. This time because I is being incremented at each iteration of the for loop, I goes to 2, or I mean from 0 to 1, so it's at 1. But num plus plus gets incremented from 1 to 2. So now it jumps back in this for each loop again, and this time it's looking for the string name of waypoint 2 is what we're looking for. So that's and so it's now going through the same thing, and it's doing a comparison. It's going through this entire game object list again until it finds waypoint 2 in that list, and then when it finds it, it'll add it into our new go list here. So now we'll have 2 elements, and so it'll continue on until it goes through, and you can see how this is going to work through repetition and build a sorted list. Now Not to get off topic here, but I just noticed I had this line of code right here inside this for each. You really don't need to be inside the for each because num is defined outside, and so we can build rather than create that variable every single time in the for each loop. We can do it one time out here, and that's actually better. We're not having to, it's because every time it's in the for each, then it creates a new string variable called name, which is fine. It worked, but it's not the proper way to do it. And then when it exits the iteration, it's a temporary variable during the execution of each iteration of the for each loop. So it's recreating that string name every time. Well, we don't need to do that. We already know what we want the string name to do. And to be honest with you, I might go ahead and change what I was saying. We start num at 0 and then we increment it to 1 in the first iteration. What we could do is just another alternative way to do this here. Again, this is about cleaning up the code, really. Some of this, because I do have a bug we're going to work on in a bit in the waypoint system. Really has to do with the tracking part and the way the new sprint mode thing was set up, whether they're running, walking, or doing both. And we need to test that because I found a bug where if I get near the tiger and he doesn't seem to, he still comes at me, but he doesn't switch to a sprint mode where he's sprinting at me. He's being controlled during the tracking phase based off of the value that's in the what's originally passed in as far as his sprint mode, for going around the waypoint system. So if it was set to walk, he's basically walking to me, and that's not really realistic. A tiger's going to walk to you to attack you. But anyways, before we get off track here, let's do this I to string. But we know I starts at 0. We want it to start at 1. So what we can do is just offset I by 1. Oops, this should have been a plus. By adding 1 to I during each iteration. So when it's at 0, I will be 1 when we're building the string name, and when it's at 1, it'll be 2. When it's at 2, it'll be 3, and so forth. When I gets to 9, which is the last iteration of the outside for loop here, I will be 10. So I mean the waypoint, the S name that we're building will be waypoint 10 because we're adding 1 each time. So what that means is I can actually comment out this, and I can comment out that. It's no longer needed. So again, there's no sense doing all that if we don't need to. And I always initially, when I make a change like that, I'll comment out the changes that I want to remove so that they're still there, because in the event that what I'm thinking at the time maybe was incorrect, even though I'm thinking it's going to work, I can go back and switch it back to the way it was, and without having to remember or retype all the code. This is just a few lines of code here, but if you're going through a long list of things that you had to remove, you don't want to have to figure out, okay, because sometimes you got all these little Boolean flags, things that are toggled on and off, and it gets confusing if, and you may forget how something was written. That's why it's good to document your code as you go. Alright, so that's going to be it. I'm pretty sure that will work the way it is. Let's just save that. But I wanted to show you the sorting part. And so what that will do is when this for loop part is done, this main for loop, this one right here, once that executes that block of code, GoList will contain a sorted list of waypoints that are game objects, not transforms. Again, we need transforms to be returned back. And so what we're doing here, and this is kind of silly the way I even have this, to be honest with you. This is another change we're going to change out. Because, first of all, waypoints, normally when you're writing a function, you're returning a value. It's all self-contained, meaning when you return the value back, the value that's being returned back goes into another variable somewhere. Well, you see I'm actually down here, you'll see in this loop what we do is we're adding into our waypoints that's been defined at the top of the script as a class level variable of type transform. it's a list. We're basically going through the iteration and using the index, the I value, as the index into the go list that we just built. That's sorted by waypoint name, by the name, and we're just extracting out the transform component of that waypoint so that we get what we need, which is the transform, which is the positional information stored as a transform in our waypoints list. But because this list is already being built, there's no reason to return it back at all. And so I need to go look at where get enemy waypoints is called. Okay, yeah, see, we're reassigning waypoints. The waypoints that's already just been set up in there, we're reassigning it back to get enemy waypoints. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify that code because we're already populating waypoints inside that function. But I kind of want to modify it so that it can return back a list of waypoints. And the way we're going to do that, see, there should be another list here that's being built that's going to be returned back, not that one. So again, let's look at our function here. Want to see if I can do this with the existing two objects that we have. Probably not. Actually, what we could have done, but I already have it this way, but we could have done a what's called a bubble sort. It's an algorithm that will take a list of variables and it'll sort it based on a value. So you know, we could essentially evaluate the integer portion of the waypoint name over here, like we're doing down here, of the current one and the previous, and it involves doing a double loop. You got a loop within a loop, 2 for loops. Hold on a second, I've got a call. Hello, this is Mike.
Hey Mike, this is Hillary calling from Garcia.
Yes, how are you?
Good. Just calling to see if you received the finance application that I sent yesterday.
I've been away actually. I haven't had a chance to check it, but when I get home later, I will definitely check on that.
All right, sir. Call me or text me or email me if you have any questions about it.
All right, thank you very much. All right, bye. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, it would be to do a bubble sort would be a double for loops, and essentially what you do is by having 2 for loops, you'll have different variables like an I and a j on the inner, I on the outside, j on the inner for loop, and then within that you would get the 2 elements like the current one and the next one, and you would compare their values, and based on which one was, you know, greater in or lower in the sort order, you would kind of put the one that's lower, you'd swap it. If the second item was lower in value than the first item, then you would swap the items positions. So it involves saving the swap function itself would save the first item in a temporary variable, basically temporary game object, and then the second item would be copied into the first item's position, which would overwrite that data. That's hence the reason you got to save it in a temporary variable first, and then you just take the temporary variable contents and assign it to the second slot position with the second item you evaluated. So essentially would swap this. It's open. Oh wait, hold up. Shush. I thought I had it open. You made it!
Yeah. Well, hey, we're all worried about you. You have no cell phone service. You can call us and say, hey, I'm going out for the night. I'll be gone.
Well, I know I'm going out for the night.
And, but once you were out, you should have called.
I'm sorry.
We missed you. Mom was waiting for you. She said you guys were supposed to go to the gym, and
What time were you? When she texted?
she called like early at 8.
I'll try like 8.
You still smell like alcohol. I mean, you're drinking all night. At
At a friend's house.
Yeah, you still smell like alcohol. It must be in your shirt or it's still in your breath.
Yeah, it's on my shirt.
Did you get any sleep? Are you going to be able to work out?
When is she coming?
You need to. She's not coming because we didn't know where the heck you were and your phone was out.
Yeah.
She wanted to call the cops and be out looking for you, but I said, let's just wait. Somebody's probably got to go to the store at like 10-ish or whatever. Then he'll probably get dropped off. So. The main thing you need to do is always communicate. Communicate is the key to eliminating problems. Let us know, hey, we're going to be out. I'm not going to make it home. Just send me a text. Hey, Dad, I'm going to hang out with so-and-so. I'll be back. We'll bring you back in the morning or whatever. I mean, at least so we know where you're at. I could have let her know. And, you know, of course, Papa was waiting on the call to pick you up, Mark. So he thought maybe 10. You know, we got all these people waiting to hear back what's going on. You know, so you can just eliminate all that. I'm glad you're safe though. That should fuck you up. Process miles of alcohol per hour. So, depending on how much you drink, you well with your standards. So you have to fire up. I don't see here. Who's that? Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Everything going today?
Oh, all right. Joey just showed up. Yeah, he just showed up. I told him to let her call her, and he said, "Well, he just texted her." Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I just told him the main thing is just he needed to communicate with us. And all right, bye.
I guess mine.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey,
yeah, he made it.
he finally showed up.
Yeah, so they were up till 6:30 in the morning at the kid's house. So
Doing
um,
what?
anyway, he's getting some rest, drinking. What do you think? Just hanging out. I told him he should have communicated with us to let us know that he was planning to just go over there and hang out or whatever, just so we know what's going on.
Tell him I said he needs to call and quit that job today. He's not going back there.
Well, I mean,
No, he's not going back there. He better find him another job.
anyway, he's resting right now. He's probably not going to make it to the gym.
Oh yeah, I already didn't. I didn't even go. He that's what he did to me today. And he upset my dad and Nikki and everybody.
Well, I wouldn't have called your dad and told him anything.
I didn't. I was talking to Nikki.
Well, you should have told her.
Well, I mean,
I was waiting because I knew he was going to show up not early. If they were out, they were probably sleeping. They'd probably be here about 9 or 10. So I was waiting. Now, if I didn't hear anything by 10, probably would have been calling around.
well, I have a good mind to go and get one of his drug tests and bring it by there and pop him with one.
But it just smells like alcohol. I can smell the alcohol in them. So they were up till 6:30. He said. So.
No, he's still gonna catch hell from me.
Well, anyway, that's not going to make anything better. Just the main thing is you got to put him in God's hands. You got to have hope that he's making the right decisions. God's helping him make them right decisions.
Well, I can't even get him to go to church with me.
If he's going out there, he needs to go. That's got to be a rule. And he's not
He
staying.
went Mother's Day and that was it.
Oh.
And Easter.
I mean, I would rather him go to his entryway into church to be going maybe Wednesdays to the youth groups. Start that way. Get him. He needs to be around kids his own age. He's been sheltered. He's been in the house too much, so he needs to be around kids his own age. But
our church is a small church.
Yeah.
So.
But it needs to be around kids that are somewhat, good and wholesome, not, gonna take him down this dark path. So,
Well, that's what these people that he works with is doing.
yep.
Oh, I'm glad he's home.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Best Buy would be not a bad gig for him working in sales. He likes to be out talking to people now, meeting different people, help people with merchandise. Maybe you should try Best Buy.
They probably pay more, pay
They're
better.
hiring. I saw stuff. They were hiring. It was on Indeed. There were jobs listed um, for Best Buy. But anyway, he made it. I think he texted you, right?
No, I don't know. I didn't get one.
He was supposed to have texted you just a little while ago, like
I
5
even
minutes ago.
called Madison to have her check his Snapchat and all that because I don't have it anymore.
Okay. Well, since you've got everybody involved, you need to notify everybody he's fine. Because now you gotta, because don't leave them hanging. Like, where's he
I
at?
know. Well, I'll let you go then.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, boo. You need to play with one of the kitties, don't you? You need to play with one of the kitties, don't you, babies? You do. You need to find a friend. You need to find a friend to play with. Another kitty friend. Not me. Alright. Sorry about that long delay there. Whew. Alright. Sorry about that. I apologize. Had something came up I had to deal with. Yeah, so going over this, you probably analyzed this code in the meantime and figured out what was going on here and how we have it working. But we did want to change this part here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a list, transform. And I'll just call it transforms with an S equals new list. Oops. Transform. Okay, what that does is initialize and create a new list. Make sure that whatever memory it needs, or there's an instance of that set up. There's been battled a lot of stuff with Unity and trying to pass stuff doesn't have like an instance of an object. You get a lot of those errors if you don't understand what's going on with Unity and the way it works, and a lot of components that they have on there are not automatically, like when you get a reference to a game object, you don't necessarily have access to, or some of the subcomponents that are on there, and you'll have to use that get component function to do that, to get a copy of it and a reference to it actually. Well, actually it's a copy because you can actually use the get component to copy it to another variable, and it works independent of the original. So it's not a reference, it's just gets a copy of it and returns that back. But you do have to use the get component because they're game objects, and the components are complicated data representations in memory there. So they handle all the details of getting that for you and allocating whatever memory is needed and returning it back properly. So inside here, again, I'm going to just comment this out, and we're going to change this to transforms, and then we're going to return transforms. And now that's going to make it where it's see, now it makes more sense. We're returning the transforms and then that are sorted, and then in here, when this function is called, get enemy waypoints, the transform sorted transforms list is then just assigned to our waypoints list, and so return back and stored in there. So that should work for us. What I like to do, since we're in here mucking around now, doing some changes I didn't anticipate on doing. Let's first of all turn off the editor camera, making sure our original test waypoints are unchecked, so they're not even visible. They're not in the world. We've got these. So we got our first waypoint here. Okay, so let's just test this. The enemy spawn here. Okay, let's just test that. Save that. Save the scene. Let's make sure it still works as anticipated. Yeah, of course I didn't have that maximize. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's just click that. I like to have a bigger scene view. Alright, so looking at what we have here, and I actually spawned this guy over here because I had moved the projection system we had set up to show the tiger running around. We had it set there and there. Let's go ahead and grab that gun. So we have a gun all in his hand, showing up like it should. Alright, and what I added, you see that 250 running around. I gave the tiger a, there was another thing I think I added. I don't know if it was in our last stream. I think that was something I added as well after I went off stream last time. And so I added the, well, first of all, the waypoint system is working, just so I know it. So you know, the code changes we made. See how it's alternating speed? He went to the next waypoint. We had one that goes to the point of that area, and then, so it's set right now for both, where it's alternating. So when he hits this next waypoint, he'll slow down. There he goes. But what I want to do is get close to him and see. Then we get his red. Okay. See, now he's not, because he's in the walk mode at that point, he stays walking. This is the bug I'm talking about. Now we went far enough away. He's still walking. Oh, I just want to show you this system is now working. Whoa. And I'm just showing, I added the health value just above his head. It's like a floating 3D text is what it is. And it just stays with the beast, the tiger. So each bullet's taking 18 damage, so that should go down to 52, which it does. Another glitch I have is I can actually be running this way when I right-click the gun is facing toward the crosshair. He's still running. That's fine. I mean, it gives us the ability to move and shoot in all directions. Taking some shield damage, some health damage. Alright, let's move out. One more bullet, he'll die. Do we want to kill him? Boom. And right now, since we don't have a die animation, I just have him disappear. Right now, we don't have a die animation for him, so the enemies will just disappear. But you see it works. You can actually shoot, take damage to an enemy, and so all that's been added to the enemy AI system. And so let's pause it again. And that is all set up down here. We've got a health variable now that we can set right here in the inspector on all our enemies. As we add additional enemies, you know, we'll configure the same options. More likely, we're going to go with the same basic settings. You see we also added, when I was working on the ground distance check, I added ground min distance and ground max distance. And basically that's going to be the minimum maximum distance we're going to check for to see if he's grounded or not, and keep it where the enemies are staying on the map. That's when they're going up some crazy things, they don't seem to rotate well, or pivot correctly and stay on the ground. So so all these other variables are the same, just the health was added as well. They're the main thing, do the health. Now let's look at the scripting on that, just so you can see. So you see the bug though, going back to the bug, and it's in the tracking area. When he starts tracking, let's look at that code. That's what we need to actually look at, is the tracking code. And that's inside the AI enemy controller. And so first of all, let's jump down here. Originally set up a function called set sprint speed in here, but I took that away. It's actually inside. We probably need to open that up. Let's go to our scripts. I think it's NPC Waypoint is what it's called. So NPC Waypoint. So let's modify that script here so we can. Yeah, see, I was playing around with something in here too, but I was gonna originally I had set it in the waypoint, thinking, well, yeah, that's where I need to put that or place that, where it can alternate or change what the sprint mode should be from that waypoint. What speed should they be running at? But instead, I took that out because what that would mean is every enemy that went to that location would be controlled by that speed, and I didn't want that. I wanted the enemy themselves to be controlled. And so what we've done is, let's look at our AI enemy controller. So what I've set up here, we have we already had our speed variables and our move variables, and we had a function that we set up called start running. So since I already had start running in here, and I know it's here somewhere, y'all remember that. What start running did right here. Start running is you pass in true or false. Do you want this enemy to start running, or false if you don't want him to run? If you don't want him to run, he's in the walk speed mode. If you say true, then he's in a run speed mode, and that's all start running does. And this is a public function that's on the AI enemy controller, which is attached to our enemy objects, and that will allow something externally to control, or internally, this function can be called to control, but right now we're using it externally by making it public. And so in the waypoint controller that we have set up for each waypoint, we have the stuff set up here. Well, first of all, we have set sprint speed. Set sprint speed is a function that's inside the waypoint, and what it's going to do is set the speed for the enemy by calling the start running function in the AI enemy controller. So this waypoint could have various enemies that could, obviously go through the waypoint, and based on the waypoint, well, based on the speed that they're currently set to, it uses the settings that are in there. So and how that's been configured. Now, one thing I do want to change. I take that back. I probably don't want to change it. If you look at spawn enemy, we had the sprint mode, and that's what we tell it what the sprint mode is of the enemy. And so when that enemy is spawned, which happens in the start here, there's some code that's been modified. This is where we had right here, our enemy is instantiated, and then we did the check where if the enemy instance is not equal to null, which means it's successfully instantiated that enemy prefab into our game world. Then we're going to do some other things. We got the, and this has been modified a little bit, not too much. We get the AI enemy controller that's on that enemy. And inside AI enemy controller, that's where we have things that we can set, functions we can call. But that's where I added, of course, this is where we set there's a set start destination, set final destination, which takes in the waypoints that are in the spawn enemy script, the transforms that are dragged and copied into those two public inspector variables. It'll just take those and store them on the enemy so that they know, it's kept with the enemy object, the starting and final destination. We still set their current destination previous the same way. And we also added the repeat waypoints. That's been added to the enemy. So the enemy has his own tracking mechanism to find out if the enemy has to repeat waypoints or not. Now, even though these are variables are set, repeat waypoints, and then we have the waypoint sprint mode, which we take in sprint mode from the inspector and store that in with the enemy. Even though those are stored in the enemy, they're actually called from the waypoint controller. So the waypoint controller will evaluate that enemy and look at these bits of information that have been stored on the enemy to determine how they need to sprint to the next waypoint and what their speed needs to be and whether they need to repeat. If they get to the final destination, do they need to repeat? And the waypoint will either send that enemy on or not. And so it may not be the best way to do it, but it's the way I did it initially. And actually, the more I'm changing this code, the more I'm seeing, I want to really keep this more self-contained within the enemy. So to make the enemy truly independent, because right now, if someone else, let's think of it this way, if I were to give you had your own project and you wanted to download that Tiger, and I just said, here, I'll give you my AI enemy controller, you just set up some waypoints on your map, and you're good to go. Add this controller to him, and he's ready to go. And obviously dragging a few things through the inspector. Well, right now this AI enemy controller works in conjunction with our spawn enemy script and our NPC waypoint controller. So you would also need to have those as well. And if you already had your own waypoint controller set up where you're doing something a little bit different, you would need that script as well. So you really need all three scripts right now. And I don't like the fact that one script is dependent upon the others to exist in order for it to work. Although in some cases you can't avoid that. That's just the way it's set up. And actually in good modular programming, you might have multiple scripts set up. But in our case, what I would like to do is have, first of all, the spawn enemy functionality. I would like to have that maybe inside the AI enemy controller script. We'll have we'll drag in basically, or add another public variable called spawn location, for example. And so we drag in the transform of a spawn location for that enemy. And so by doing that, we can then have the code to actually instantiate, which is what you're seeing right here, and spawn these enemies in. It could be built in the enemy. Same with all this stuff we're doing. Start destination, their final, the repeat waypoint sprint mode are already in the AI controller right now. So are these functions. So why not move all that to the AI enemy controller portion and keep it self-contained in there? So essentially we could take that script, apply it to an enemy object, for example a Tiger that has the basic again, if you want to use that, you have to. We mentioned before, you have to have an enemy that has the 4 basic move animations like idle, a walk, and a run, and maybe an attack. Now, if you don't have those, what will happen is it'll still go and it'll do all those things, but you won't have the animation going on. You'll just have this object moving around with no animation. It'll be moving around. It'll be doing all the logic it needs to do as far as moving around, but the animations obviously won't be there, so they won't be synced with it. I'm pretty sure Unity will still allow that to happen. It doesn't like crash your program where it won't work, but I could also add in to make it a little more foolproof, is if those particular animations are not in there, to do checks for that, so that it doesn't. If there is an issue, it can still operate on an object that maybe doesn't have animations initially. Maybe eventually they will, like if you're doing your own, but you just built your model, and then you're going to add your animations later, but you want to test the logic of the AI enemy controller to see if it actually moves it around where it needs to and works. You can still do that. And so like I said, I think it'll still work with the way this code is written, but you'll get errors obviously which could cause some issues, because there'll be some references that it can't get. So anyways, without getting too sidetracked on that, yeah, I want to move a lot of this logic and keep it all self-contained in the AI enemy controller, so that it can just be dropped on any enemy, and then you set up all these things like I said, the start destination where it needs to go, final destination, its loop, and then things like the sprint mode from throughout the waypoint system, because we're really not going to have enemies that are just going to stand there statically. You could actually have an enemy that just stands there in a certain position on the map, and what just waits for a player to get within a certain distance, and when it does, it chases him down, and then if he gets out of range, then he'll just go back to his position. But with this waypoint system here, what I plan to do, and what I started talking about earlier, was setting up sub waypoint areas that would be like a patrolling area. And rather than right now, in this test we have right now, the second test I've done, I have waypoints that go around the entire Trader Village area. Well, I want to make the waypoint trips smaller, more concise, and I want to have I want to be able to spawn multiple tigers in and around the Trader Village area outside there, but I don't want to have them all running the same circular waypoint system that goes around the entire Trader Village, like just a line of tigers. What I want to do is have 4 or 5. For example, down here, we may have one that's like kind of patrolling this front area. We'll kind of have probably 4, one on each side. So I have one at the north side here, one on this side, one here, and one there. So just have them patrolling in these areas. And it may even be the pattern, the way the waypoints will be, they'll be just put out there, but we could control the waypoint in a way that he's doing some kind of figure 8 or whatever, but he's staying contained in this area. And we'll have tigers here, we'll have them here, and then we'll set up, we'll basically set up a, right now I have a hard-coded, what do we call hard-coded? There's one enemy spawn in here right now. That's another thing. The enemy spawn is a separate game object right here. And so that's the spawn location right now. But ultimately, what I would like to do is be able to pass in a transform, again, into the AI enemy controller, where it tells it, okay, where is this tiger going to spawn, or this enemy going to spawn within the world. And so essentially what we'll do, if we look back at our, let's go to our enemy, click on our tiger. So we'll have down here in the inspector, we'll have additional variables that we'll have for the public, the start destination, the final destination. We'll have the repeat, repeat waypoint system, Boolean variable, the sprint mode. All that will be set here in the inspector and the AI enemy controller, as well as a spawn location, that it'll spawn into, and then from there it'll walk to that first waypoint or run, really walk, because there's something with the animator, the animations, you can't, for some reason you can't just go directly from a, and I may need to play around, maybe I don't have the state machine set up right. I should have the idle. I haven't actually tried to set up the idle where you can go directly from idle to walk. I have it idle, walk, and then to run. So when you try to flip it from an idle to a run state, that's not a possible transition that's in the animator. So I probably would have to set up an additional transition to support that, to allow a run from idle by setting up the transition for the animation directly from idle to run as a one-way. Well, we could do it both ways, and actually they go straight from a run to a walk. That would just be another transition. And then you could also have the transition path that goes from idle to walk to run and back. But so I think we'll work on it later. But right now, I'm not going to worry about that. That would probably solve a lot of the issues I've been having with the, actually it might, now that I think about it, with the animations. Sometimes it'll get to the point where it's the state of the logic set up in script is not in sync with what it can do in the state machine for the animator. And so I've always had to put in these checks that if we're not already walking, then we're not going to run. We're going to just tell it to walk first, and then on the next frame or so, then it would do the run. So, and that seems to be working. Well, anyways, that's another thing to worry about later. I'm getting sidetracked. The main things I want to incorporate a lot of our code that's in basically the spawn code and the tiger. I mean the spawn and the waypoint code into the AI enemy controller script. I mean, it was when I was doing testing, it was great to have that code in there. Actually, it was isolated in a way, which made it easier to test. I would know exactly, if there was a glitch, where to go and look at a shorter script. But in the overall sense of this game, and you look at the high level view of what needs to happen, we need a waypoint system or an enemy that can be basically spawned in and know where to go. Essentially, is what I'm getting at. It'll know where to go right away. All you have to do is spawn it in, attach the AI enemy controller script to it, and spawn, and it takes over from there once everything's set up in the inspector. And so, the reason I started going with the stuff the other way is because, again, in the beginning I was kind of testing. I just have a player that spawned in, so I attached the player spawn script to the player spawn game object that I set up, and again, all that's going to change too, because the player object himself, needs to have a public transform inspector variable set up where or something internal that can set that from within. It shouldn't be dependent upon a script, an external script. It doesn't need to be, is what I'm getting at. It can be. I'm not saying it can't be, but I'm just saying for what we need to do, we need to start taking some of this logic and putting it into a single unit for portability reasons is the main, I guess, the main driving factor here. It doesn't make sense to have a lot of the logic. I mean, the waypoint is essentially the only thing we're using the waypoint for, really, is for the transform location, the XYZ position. So we know we can use that information to determine, where an enemy game object needs to go next. So the reason I paused or hesitated a little while ago is I had a thought that came into my head as I was getting ready to say that, and I was thinking about at the same time the code that was going to that we're going to move into the enemy script or AI controller script, but I don't know if it wouldn't be such a bad idea just to attach the spawn enemy script itself and the NPC controller script instead of to these other game objects. Just attach them all to the enemy. We can still keep the code separate to isolate it and keep it separate for purposes, you know, of modularity of the code, and testing and debugging to be easier. But it also will still keep it with the enemy. So once you create that enemy object, for example, the tiger over here, we click on that. We just have the additional scripts added. It's all self-contained. You can still, it's still in your prefab, which can be shared, you know, with other folks. But yeah, but by doing that, I think that would, yeah, that may be something I'll do at first and just make sure that works. Matter of fact, we can do that right now, because that was one of the things I wanted to do was, well, I'll tell you what, before we do that, because I know I mentioned earlier that we have a bug fix to take care of. Let's move on to that real quick. And again, the bug fix was that when we get within tracking distance of the tiger, he starts coming toward us like he should, but he doesn't come toward us at a sprint, you know. And so what I need to do is I need to make sure that the tracking code, which I know I did set it to utilize the sprint, you know, the sprint functionality, the set sprint mode and all that, but really that needs to work independently of the overall sprint method that's used to go from waypoint to waypoint. And so let's look at that code first. So let's jump out to here to Visual Studio, and it was in our AI enemy controller. I'm hoping I just commented out the stuff that I changed so that we can just reverse that. But anyway, so we're looking at the tracking code is what we need. The tracking. Okay, here it is. Is tracking. Okay, so I don't see anything there. Okay, we do have start running false here. Okay, this is where I started using this, and I probably shouldn't have. See, I did all this. Additionally, we have distance to player is greater than the tracking run radius. So I guess at this point, this is where, oops, enemy out of attack range. So just go about its business. Basically just go on its way. So if the distance to the player is greater than the tracking radius, we can just let him go on his way. And since the speed of this character is altered by the waypoint itself, you know, it's toggles between a walk and a run or a sprint or whatever. So all we need to do is, okay, here's actually a better way. And I'm thinking this is probably a lot simpler than I thought. See, I'm going to get rid of a lot of this. What we need to do is we need to store the current speed that the tiger was at just before he starts tracking. And then when he stops tracking, we'll set it back. We'll just set that speed back to whatever it was. So what we can do is we can go into right here where we're saying if the player is not in the safe zone and the distance of the player is less than the tracking radius, then let's expand that out here. I'm going to need to add another variable to the track player. It needs to be up here in a class level so that we can store it and keep it. So this will be a private though. We don't need to expose it anywhere else. So we'll put it in this section here with our other private. So we'll say private bool we'll just call it was running before tracking. We're going to initially set that to false, but we can we don't necessarily have to set it here because we're going to set it. But initially, well, see if we have. Yeah, I guess based on our move setting here, that would allow us to determine, like if we're in a walk or a run. So what we can say then, let's go back to our track player here. Okay, so we're tracking the player. That's where we set track and player equals true. And that's also where we'll say, okay, trying to think through this because this is not like a function that's just called and then you know, where it just stays within this function until it stops tracking. This track player is called once a frame, and then it just looks, okay, are we still in the distance? Yeah, if we are. So what we need to do is say if it's tracking the player, we only want to set that one time. Crap. So just make sure. So if we're tracking the player, it jumps down in here, which is fine. And if we're not, do we have an else statement down here? Yeah, we do have an else. And that's how it resets the destination, so it knows how it's tracking. So this is where we want to reset that. And so we'll set it one time. Yeah, that's fine. We'll just set it one time here. And we'll say it was running before tracking is equal to. We're going to set up an expression, and we'll say underscore move equal to run speed. So if he was moving at a sprint pace before he started tracking, basically the move value would be equal to run speed, and that would evaluate to a true, which would set our Boolean value was running before tracking equal to true. Otherwise, okay, so this is basically a shorthand here saying it's an expression. It's a short way to do it, a simple way. It evaluates this expression, and based on its value, if it's true, then it takes the value here and assigns it back here. Otherwise, if this is equal to false, it'll take that. But I probably don't even, since I'm just doing a simple true false, it's not really like a number. I could probably just leave it the way it is because that evaluates equal to false is still assigned false there either way. That's not needed. I was thinking something different. Okay, so that's where it's set. That's where we set it. And so we need to reset the speed back over here, along with we're doing the destination. So let me just explain what this is. If the variable, if old destination contains an object, it means Tiger was tracking player and prior destination values were saved. So basically, yeah, when and if you look up here when he starts tracking, right at the beginning it says it's tracking, then it assigns checks if old destination equal to null. Well, the old destination hasn't been assigned, so let's assign the value of old destination to whatever the destination was that he was going, his path that he was going on before he started tracking. And of course, it only does this one time, because if once it's already set, old destination will not be equal to null, so it won't keep like reassigning that destination. It only does it the one time. And so at the bottom here, we need to, this is where we need to reset the speed. And I guess we could say I guess, let's see. Well, we probably only need to do it right here. Let's not overkill this. I was going to put it outside that group because yeah, also, but the only time we really want to change that speed is when we know it's coming out of tracking to a non-tracking mode. And so this is where we're going to set up the speed. We're going to say if was running before tracking, then we'll say start running true, else start running false, which will set it to a walk speed. We're assuming there's no idle speed in this scenario. It's either walking or running. But I guess it is possible that they could be an idle speed, because let's say a tiger gets to his destination, the last waypoint, he just stops. And then a player walks by him. They don't start chasing him. Of course, if we get out of range, it'll go back to his previous state. We're going to send him walking, which I guess will send him, it should send him walking back to his last final destination, because when he gets back over there, he will check his flags, whatever that says he shouldn't loop or continue. It should stop him again, leave him there. That should work fine. Again, we're going to test this. All right, so this will handle that. Now let's look in. Again, we said we need to modify this. We don't really want to be modifying, because the tracking was a certain tracking code was working fine the way it was. And I think originally the only thing I had was this, that if distance to the player was greater than tracking radius and speed was equal to idle speed, start running equals false, which at least gets him walking. Else, let's see. Let's just do this real quick. We're going to comment out everything from here down to this else that I added. So we're taking out that chunk of code right there. So the only thing we're going to do is we're just going to check that if if he's at an idle speed, if he was that we want to get him to at least start walking, which he'll walk back to hopefully his old destination. I don't know where he's going to be going at that point. I guess that's yeah. Okay, so that should. I think that's how we had before, and I'd probably have to look at. Luckily, I saved a lot of backups. I could go back and look at some of the script. As a matter of fact, let's do that real quick here, just to be sure. I don't want to do any guesswork here. It's always good to do backups. So every day, I back up every day, actually. Or every time I make some change. I know I make, not every day, but if I made changes that day, you'll see, in most cases, not always, but I really started trying to get in the habit of creating these. Now I stopped doing actual folders because the files get fairly large. I'm doing these zip files, and so you see I'll have backup copies. But so the last one that I actually did was 6.1. But let's check the 30th. That may be close enough. We may have had written that code already back then. No, actually, we don't. We don't even have. There it is. AI Environment Manager. No, we didn't even have one. Wow, it's only the second. So we really wrote that. So I'm missing it. No, it may have been in the main assets folder. That's what it was. Yeah, I moved all this stuff. I realized the ones that I was creating recently were being put in there. So I did add a Tiger Dead script, but it's an empty script right now. Okay, so let's open that. Anytime I open the code outside of the environment, I'll just open in Notepad. I don't really want to make any changes. And so let me just slide this over so you can see. It's on my other screen here. So we're going to just scroll down and look at this. We don't want to make any changes, just view it. Let's go look at, okay, here's our track player. Okay, so this is what we had before. If speed equals idle speed, then we're going to start running, else we're going to false, otherwise we're going to start running true. Okay, so let's go back to our code here then. If under speed, then idle speed, then we'll do that. Else, so the else head start running to. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to be correct here, because let's say, for example, we set our enemy to do walking only through the entire waypoint system. See, this is going to change here because that's what we had, but it's not going to work in this case, and that's why I started thinking I had to go and change all this here with adding in the waypoint checks here and how it was set. But if the waypoint's set for walking, then when he stops tracking, he needs to be walking. Now, if he's sprinting, first of all, the speed is never going to be idle speed. Once he's already moving, the speed will never be idle speed. So that start running false, which sets him to a walk speed, will never be executed here. It's always going to execute in the else statement to start running. So when he gets out of the radius of the player and he no longer is in attack mode, he's not tracking, it will force him to start running, even though he wasn't running previously. I kind of want him to go back to the state that he was at. Although that would work, and that's okay. We can get him just to run to his next waypoint. But in a way, it makes it look like he's running away like a coward, you know, once he gets out there. But I guess we could have him, I mean, it would work. It probably wouldn't matter, because what's going to happen, instead of him walking to the waypoint, he's going to run to that waypoint that he was actually originally heading toward, his destination. And then at the next destination, it'll reset him back to a walk mode, which could work. But what I'm trying to do is just make sure that he just resumes whatever speed he was at prior to the tracking mode. So this is where we'll need to and I guess this would handle it. If he was running before tracking mode, start running true, else start running false. So because this is a code also on the next frame. On the next frame, because during this frame he'll just start running here once he gets out of the realm. Distance player out of tracking. And then in the next iteration, when he's out of the zone, see, distance player is less than tracking. Tracking is reset actually to false. It assumes a false, he's not tracking, and it gets set to true based on whether he's still within the radius. So so yeah, that could work actually, even though we're setting that to true. That's fine. We could also add this check here over there, but this is probably better to leave it right here. It's going to be just one split frame that it probably won't even have time to matter. So let's go ahead and run this test now. Let's run this. Oops. And we can go ahead and tell you what. Let's bring up that. Let's just close this notepad here. And let's go back here. Let's wait till it compiles. So I know I have about 3 warnings. It should show up. So I know it's usually ready. 6 now. Yeah, I started adding. I'm building a message box pop-up. Something we can pop up, like when the player dies, for example. We need to pop something up. You know, just a general. I'm trying to build a generic message window that's kind of transparent, translucent, but it'll pop up. It's part of the UI system. I'm using the UI for that. So initially it's disabled and it'll just appear when needed in the middle of the screen. So that's why you've seen some of these that are not used, or they've been assigned not used. Anyway, so let's hit play now. Let's see if our bug is fixed. So what I want to do is I want to get up to him, but I want to have him start. Okay, now he's in the sprint mode. I want to catch up to him while he's still sprinting. I don't know if I can or not. Okay, no. He's walking now. You see that? He was walking right after he hit that waypoint, and now he should still be walking. Okay. So now what we're going to do is once he starts sprinting, I want to catch him on a sprint. And I guess because he's going to be ahead of me, I'll have to catch him coming across this way. I like the fact that you can turn to about 90 degrees and look at your side and still run forward. But once you start going beyond that, that's when it starts, you know, changing your direction. Okay, so now he's chasing us. He's in full sprint mode. So now alright, let's get out here and now see, he's walking. He's not. And the reason that is, and that's what I suspected, is the variables being set or toggled, because this track player is called every time, and initially tracking player set to false, then it comes down in here and it's, you know, if the player's not in the safe zone, it's resetting this here, we need to set this one time outside of here. We need to take that out of there, and we need to move it outside of track player. It needs to be set in the start function. Well, actually, it needs to be. It's going to be set through. And again, it's down to the waypoint controller. See, the waypoint controller is where it's controlling his speed. Um, and so you need to have a way through here that it somehow can set that variable in the AI enemy controller. Again, I don't like breaking this logic up, but if we were talking about earlier, we can drag this controller and add another controller to the actual enemy object, and same with the spawn enemy. We'll just drag those and put them on instead of the actual spawn game object we've set up in the waypoints game objects. We'll drag these onto the player, and this way we still have the functionality modularized, where it's a modular code setup. So we don't have all the waypoint code in the AI enemy controller, and we don't have the spawn code in the spawn controller. We can just put all that. We can just attach those scripts to the enemy object and keep it self-contained that way as a prefab. So if we ever need to add another tiger somewhere, all we do is drag him. We can instantiate him and just set his values, in code, where he's going to spawn at, things like that. That's the other thing. That all needs to be really changed, where it can all be set in code. And so maybe we'll leave it the way it is, where it's all public, because someone that wants to just drop in an enemy and set those publicly from the inspector, you can do that. But we also need to have functionality or functions that can be called to override all that. Well, actually, we already have it. We have our set functions, so they can be called after the object is instantiated. They can be called, and those things can be overridden through scripting. So we're already set up for that. I just realized that either way it's going to work. So I'm not going to worry about it for now. Yeah, but what I was getting at is we need to have a way that we can set that from the outside. So in order to do that, we'll have to create a public property here for this. And the way we'll do that, I've been using this quick action. Just right click on it, go to the quick action option. And you have two choices always, but I always like to use, I guess I don't necessarily need to use what's running before tracking anymore. I'll just use the I'll use the property instead of using this private field. So it should dim it out. When we do that, it'll dim it out. Alright, so let's go down to our code here that we had. Yeah, use the property, switch it out to the property name, was running before tracking. Okay, so now we can, with that set in our NPC waypoint controller, where it sets the sprint speed. Again, that's only called at certain times. So that's how we'll set that value. When it gets to a certain waypoint, it'll set it. Not only is it set in the speed variables, but we'll have it set one more variable in there. So let's go down to set sprint speed. Okay, so if it's equal to sprint, b sprinting equals true, AI start running true. We'll also set well, I wonder if I have do we have access to the AIC at this point? I think we do. Yeah, we got an AIC AI enemy controller that's defined here, and AIC itself is defined actually up here, so it's available throughout the entire script. And where the set sprint speed is being called, it's after AIC is actually being a reference to that is gathered. So inside here, that's perfect. We can just add it here. AIC dot, we can say was running before tracking equals true, because we're at this point we'll just match it to whatever's over here, whatever the AI, the value of that's being passed into. Well, yeah, another way I'm thinking. See, we're setting this B sprinting. So we can do this one time. See, if you notice, B sprinting is false. It sets AR start running to false. Based on the value of whatever B sprinting is, here it toggles because it's saying on each time this is called, it toggles the value of sprinting back and forth when we're doing both, and then it checks it. So we have B sprinting that we can check down here. So in here, yeah, B sprinting, we'll set it right in here. That's when it does the last waypoint speed swap. Okay, so we already had that variable, actually. Last waypoint speed swap. So I did set up a variable for that. So we don't, wait a minute, we can go back into the AI enemy controller. I think I was doing that in anticipation of this. Because we could say if last waypoint speed swap is equal to sprint waypoint sprint mode dot sprint, let's go back there. I'm getting confused in this now. Oh, it's Harvest Global is what we have. Yeah, so those variables are being, I think I started trying to work on this and I got sidetracked. I was so tired. Sometimes I work on this late night. Okay, so if that's true, then we'll just do start running equals true. Else well, we're just gonna start running false. So we don't really need to have those brackets. We're doing a single statement with an if else. You can do it like that without the brackets. When you get into one or more than one statement, that's when you need to have the curly braces so it can logically put all those blocks, those lines of code into a single block. And so what we're going to do temporarily is we're going to comment out what we just tried to add. We're also going to go into our, well, originally we put it here, but we took it out. The variable that we declared, we no longer need. This was running before. Yeah, see, that's that variable. I just set that up for that purpose. We can comment out this here because it's duplicating. It's another variable doing the same thing as what we already had. So Yeah, so it's already been set through the Waypoint controller. All right, so that should fix it for us. Of course, you want to test it now. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you see, last AI sprint was set to. I even had some debug statements still in there that were showing as it switches between waypoints. It'll show these values. All right, so let's get this working now. I'm ready to move on to what we were talking about earlier. So we're going to run through here. First, I want to catch him when he's in a sprint mode. See if we can catch him here. Well, he's in a sprint mode. Yeah. Okay, so he's sprinting, now he's chasing us. And he's walking. But I kind of want to catch him in a walk mode and let us get here and then see if he changes. Okay. So the waypoint reset, but you see how he went? He didn't directly go from the speed he was supposed to be at up to the sprint. He just kind of slid over there and then went, hit the waypoint. And he was sprinting, so he would have been toggled back to a walk. That the waypoint is still working, but taking him back to the right speed, that did not work. So I guess we need to figure out why did he not go. So we look at our code again. I mean, he's in it. Oh, I know what it was. We got to a safe zone when he was still in an attack state. So he was really at a stop state at that point. There's a code here that we stop him in the tracking right there. If he is, distance the player is less than the tracking idle radius. We have what we call an idle radius here, where he's in that standing next to us, sort of in the attack mode. We stop the enemy, stop his movement, because we don't want him to keep bumping into us, because they'll push our player because of the physics, and we both have rigid bodies. He'll start moving us, so we have to stop the enemy. And so he's in a stop state. You can't go from stop straight up to run, I said, because of our state machine and our animator. So the fix for that, actually, just like we did here, if last waypoint equals sprint, this here is going to need to change to that. If he's in a walk, it don't matter. We'll just send him on walking here. Now, if he's in a sprint speed, then we do another nested if statement. That if his speed was at an idle speed, which he would be if he was standing or next to us attacking, well, we want to start him to a walk first for the first frame. And then after that, once that state is switched to the animator, he's in that state. We have it set where the state does not have to, he doesn't have to complete the animation to move on to the next. We remove that restriction. So he can go directly from one frame of walking to a full run. But it has to at least initiate that one state in order to do the transition for the animations to work. We can see our state machine is not set up. Look here. See, our state machine goes from idle to walk to run. It doesn't go straight from idle to run. If it did, then you can go right to a direct run. But it still works fine this way because we don't have the restriction where the entire walk animation has to complete before it transitions out to the run. And the reason that works is because has exit time is not checked. When that's checked, the transition, it has to do the certain length of time for that animation to transition out. Notice if you remove that, then it can just move from one animation to the next without completing that complete animation for that state. Alright, so let's go back here and check that. Okay, we're ready. Now let's test it again. So let's run again. Let's try to get the jump on this now that we know where he's going to be at. Okay, so now he's chasing us. He's chasing us, chasing us, chasing us, chasing us. He's in a stop state there. Walk. Will he go to a run? Yeah, that time he did. Working better. We do have the animation work, and I maybe just getting a little picky on this. Ah, he died. And locked up at the same time. Yeah. Okay. So we got our logic pretty much working better. I still don't like the fact that he didn't run to that, but hey, gotta walk before we can run, right? So why did this lock up, though, is the question. All this is saved. Let's close that. Let's do that. Task manager. Bear with me 1 second. It's not really saying like it's. Oh yeah, there it is. Not responding. Let's end all that. All right. So yeah. Anyway, so we have that going. So let's launch this again. Let's look at our die code. It's another reason I save stuff, because if it locks up like that, whatever changes you just made, especially if you're writing a lot of script and you didn't save, well, I guess in most cases the script would be potentially saved. I don't really know. I don't take that chance. I always save it. Make sure I save it in Visual Studio before I switch back to Unity, so I know those changes were written out. Yeah. So, anyways, getting back to what we were planning to do. So that part I'm going to leave alone for now, because it's working for the most part. I mean, it's working. It's not exactly doing what we need to, but there's, it's that was a short distance from that spawn point. So he may have. We actually have an override too. Actually, that's right. There's an override in our radius. There's the walk radius. So that's what it was. He was still in the walk radius zone. It's really not a glitch. As soon as I walked away from him and got in the safe, well, it's still in the safe zone. That's when we need to check that if the player's in the safe zone, we need to ignore the walk radius altogether. That's probably what we need to do, but that's fine. If that waypoint wasn't so close, I believe he would have went out to a sprint to that waypoint like he was sprinting initially. And so we can test that real quick here. Let's see. Let's real quick. Let's also look at our player there. All right. I thought I hit play. It just didn't click for some reason. All right, so now we're having some issues here. What's the issue here? Our UI HUD is checked. What are we missing here? Oh, this editor camera. No, that's removed. Okay. Island, terrain, map waypoints, test 2. We have waypoints. Let's go to our tiger, our enemy. I've noticed this happens when the game locks up and crashes. It puts some of your components in a corrupted state, and some weird stuff will be showing up. Yeah, jeez, because everything was just working before. So our lighting, it didn't save. I don't know why it doesn't. Why it has to calculate that each time. I think it should remember that. I renamed our global game object to just GGO. That's what that is. Which has our harvest globals in it. Enemy spawn. It's all set. Our waypoints should be good. Let's check our waypoints. These are the 10 waypoints we'll be using. All those are active. Let's go to our scene. Alright. Must have just started it too early. Now it's fine. Other than the fact the lighting's not there. Okay, so we're going to test this on the back side. I'm not going to really try to lure them out here. Staying along the edge. And hoping my stamina will build up enough. Okay, so here he comes running. He's sprinting, we know that. Now he's chasing us. So we got him in a walk mode right now. Walk. Let's see. Yeah, see, he tried to go into sprint mode, but the animation didn't take. And I wonder why that is, because we had our code set in there to trigger that. Let's make sure it did save those code changes. On our enemy, let's modify this. Edit scripts. Yeah, those are the changes we set in there, but they're still just a minor glitch. Speed is equal to idle speed. Ah, I know when. I see the glitch now. I'm only checking to see if the sprint mode was in sprint. The last waypoint speed swap was in sprint, or well, really, other cases it could be in the both, where it's set to both. You know, the setting of both instead of walk or sprint. There's a both setting, which is what we're in right now. So that's why it's bypassing that. We need to do an or statement here, or if last waypoint speed goes to sprint. Okay, so if it is, then if the current speed is an idle speed, then we need to start running as false. Else, we're going to start running as true. Let's save that change. All right, let's also do this. Let's look at player manager script. So I want to take a peek at real quick. Yeah, if player dead. Okay, that's when the player died. See, okay, this is what caused it to lock up right here. I haven't figured out with these components here. It used to be a through events function where you can keep it checking the events, but this event system here in Unity is obviously going to work different than what's available traditionally in Visual Studio. So that's essentially that's what's causing our lockup. This right here. Okay, what I think I'm going to need to do, yeah, this code here, number one, needs to be taken completely out of here. Let's do, but I want to do this though. Let's keep a copy of it here. Just comment it out. And we're going to look at this code in a little bit here. It's going to move to inside the actual message box itself. I just want to leave that to see if it will show up on the screen. All right, so now let's go back here. Let's clear that. All right, so let's play. I hit the wrong keys. And we got an error right off the bat. What the hell is causing that? Yeah, so right off the bat, we're getting another error. I don't know why it's showing those two objects like that. We had it happen before. But then I ran it a second time that was not showing up. It's just kind of odd. And in this case, let's see if it shows up again. Yeah, they're still showing up. Yeah, so why is that? What's changed? Let's see, UI HUD. Well, trying to look for that message box thing that I set up, and it's actually no longer here, which is kind of odd. Oh, it's I've made it a prefab. UI dialogues message box. All right, so let's UI dialogues. There it is, message box. So we initially have it turned off. Got some components set in there. It shouldn't really call any of that code until it's needed, but I don't think that's actually the issue. Like I said, this thing acts quirky sometimes. Well, I'm trying to think what I changed. Other than that, I mean, that was the only thing I did was comment out that code. Surely commenting out code shouldn't affect it. I wonder if there's a way to force a rebuild from here. Oh, that's an actual build, but that's not what I'm trying to do. Let's just save. We save one and come out here and see what it does. I'm going to rebuild it. Yeah, see, the camera gets all screwed up when that happens because these objects are like. Don't know exactly what caused that, but what I am going to do, I'm forced to change there. We'll resave. I thought it would. I guess it recognized there wasn't really a change. Let's comment that out. Let's do that. Okay, so there we go. Finally got it to do that. That's what I was waiting on. Now let's run it and see what happens. Yeah, it's still showing that. So, like I said, it does something quirky like that. It was working fine just a minute ago, and so I want to see what happens if we die here. Does it lock up again? Does it keep going? Yeah, it keeps going. There was obviously that code we had was causing it to lock up. Yeah, actually, another change I want to make, though, now that I think about this last waypoint speed swap. Um, yeah, I really only need to check if it's sprint. Both doesn't really give us a good indication. Both just says, okay, it was one or the other. We were doing either a sprint or not, or a walk. I'm going to get that out of there. It's either going to be, yeah, the only time we want to be sprinting or checking for sprinting is when it is, in fact, sprint. Because if it's not, then it's going to do a walk, which this sets it to a walk anyway. Start running, and it's works in all cases. But again, we are doing this check that if the speed is not equal to, if they're standing still, if the enemy is standing still, we're going to start running as false, which means it's walking. Set it, otherwise, we'll set it to true. So let me close that. Still don't know exactly why. Okay, so that's why I was wondering why all those things were categorized. I had the collapse clicked. All right. Let's maximize that. Let's check this out again. See, now it's gone. I think what happened was something got corrupted, you know, when it lost all the lighting, all the settings. So at a certain point, it has to render all the static objects and things until it gets to a certain point. They're going to show up. It's kind of odd. So he walks back. That seems to be okay. I guess I need to catch him now on the time when he's actually sprinting. There's a sprint. Should be a stop. And then walk, and now sprint. Now he should be sprinting from the next point. Now he just sprinted, but he's not sprinting. He's just started running. So I think what I'm doing, because the animation still is not, until we fix that, where we have an idle to run option. Yeah, that's that. Let's go to enemy tiger. All right, and all right. So we might go ahead and just set up an idle state. Make a transition. Let's go straight to the run. And an idle transition back to idle. So let's do that. Let's add a parameter. Speed is greater than What else do we have here? Let's see. Yeah, what happens is I see what's going on. The speed is not going to be greater than the speed values are getting reset. But let's see, reset 0.5. That should be fine. We're setting them. We're just not trapping them here. Okay, so it's greater than 0.5, and then transition back. Speed is less than 1. Alright, so that should hopefully fix our issue now, because now we have a transition state from idle straight to run. We'll catch him on the next one. Kind of missed that. He'll be walking there. See, that just doesn't work out well. Don't like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete that state. We're going to delete that state. Oops. Delete the wrong one. That's what I want to delete. Do we still have our, yeah, speed? Okay. Yeah, that didn't work out so well for us. So let's go back to our inspector scene. Let's see, Tiger. We're going to edit our script again. AI enemy controller. We're just going to set it right now where he's going to walk every time back. Once he stops tracking, he's just walking, regardless of what his speed was prior to that. He's going from idle to walking, or walk. If he was walking, he's still walking until he gets to his next waypoint. Then it'll set whatever speed needs to be set there. Yeah, because this does not seem to be working well. So regardless of what's going on here, we're going to take that out. We're just going to have him walking. That's it. All right, so going back to what we were trying to do though earlier, now that we have that, we decided on that, we're just going to leave it at that, not worry about that little nuance. But I do want to see if we can take these two scripts and attach them directly to our enemy. So, for example, let's start with the spawn island. We'll do one at a time. Let's see, island, terrain. The other thing, we're not going to have just a single enemy spawn anyway, so we're going to have come up with a better way for this. It's better to have it all on the enemy, that we can create various instantiate these enemies in different areas. Alright, so the location A, and actually the enemy spawns within that. So that's what we have here. We have a spawn enemy script. We dragged in the Tiger prefab, waypoint 1, waypoint 10. We checked that and set it to both. So what we're going to do for the tiger, though, first of all, we're going to uncheck this script from the transform. It's not active. We're going to go over here. We're going to add a component. Go to our scripts folder. And we're going to add the enemy spawn script. Oh, I know why it may not work. We're making a direct reference to anything on the enemy spawn game object. Might be an issue, but I think because we dragged it all in, I think it's going to be okay. We're going to just double check that. So spawn enemy added in there. Okay, so enemy prefab. There it is. Of course, it's itself. That's the thing about it. It's actually itself. No worries. We'll just slide it in anyway. Starting waypoint. Let's look at our test set waypoint. We had waypoint 1. Why won't let us drag it there? Why is it not doing it? That's kind of odd. Does this have to be active? Is that why? Is that what I don't like? Oh, I know what it is. It's not an instance. Has to be something you can't drag it to. Why I could drag another prefab to the prefab, but I can't drag a game object to the prefab. You have to have it as an instance in your scene. And so what we're going to need to do. Hello, babies. Hello. Got my little kitten climbing up my leg here. Finally, we got some lighting. Yeah, so what we'll have to do is set that up a little bit different. Just drag it into the scene, like I said, and then we'll set it on the tiger here. So we'll drag in waypoint 1, waypoint 10. It's going to be repeat, and we're going to let this one just do a total sprint all the time. I'll leave it at both like the original, so we can test that. Okay, so now that that's set, then we have to apply these changes, which will apply it back to the prefab. And then if we look at our prefab by clicking on here, we'll see it did not bring those transforms over. And why is that? Something quirky going on here. All right, so let's apply that now. Maybe it had to be active. I don't know. I'm really perplexed as to why it's doing this kind of crazy crap. I've seen this happen before. It must be some kind of glitch. I don't really know. See if you can drag that in here and put these waypoints in here. You should be able to save that out back to. Yeah, that's not right. Unless the reason being is because it's a prefab. Can't. Yeah, I'll probably have to. So I'd have to set up all these waypoints as prefabs. That's what I'm guessing now. Oh, come on now. Do I really have to do that? Let's create a folder here. Actually, these are waypoints, not that. All right, so let's see if that's the issue. Drag in 1, 2. Maybe we can just drag them all in together. Make. No, can't do multi-grab. I don't like that. It's just ridiculous if it works that way, but there's. So let's delete this. Let's go to our enemy tiger. And all right, so let's look at our NPC waypoints. So waypoint 1, yeah, that's what it is. So in trying to modularize all this, apparently, because the tiger starts off as a prefab, he's not a game object. We're not going to be able to drag game objects into the prefab. It has to be set up a little bit different. So anyways, let's set up now that way. Let's save the scene. Just make sure that all works the same way. And it's not working. So we're not going to go with that logic, and I should have realized it after. The spawn has the instantiation code in it for our tiger. And so we can't actually put that on there. Now we could probably put the waypoint code more likely can go on there. But the other way, not, because he's not instantiated. The enemy, if you look, initially he's disabled. So how are we going to access the spawn script and get it to run when it's disabled? So we're going to remove that component for now. What we're essentially going to have is we're going to have to write a function that gets called external from spawn location. We just need to modify this because again, the concept of the spawn location, that's set for the way we did that was based off of the way we did items that would spawn in the world, just static items that are spawning in the world, items we pick up, our master inventory. And that's kind of what we did. But when we're spawning in, enemies and NPCs, they're going to need probably a different spawn method that's out external from their game object themselves. Or at least the code can be in there, but it needs to be called externally. So, yeah, we'll need to write something special that'll at least instantiate. Once it's instantiated, then all the scripting kicks in. But see, a lot of this stuff needs to be set up ahead of time anyways. So I'll have to look at the best way to do that. If we look at, let's look at the enemy script here. This kind of stuff here at the start, of course, you get the waypoints, that's fine. We get the random waypoints over there. Index 2 random waypoint. And actually, the get enemy. Oh, I see what I have set up here. If you leave, I was looking at this. Why am I? Okay, if you don't set the starting and the ending waypoints over here on the spawn enemy, because it's not required. If you don't, what it does, it does a random one. If you look at that code here, it's checking the starting waypoint equal to null. That's where these are here, the starting and ending public transforms. If they're not set in the inspector and they're null, then it gets a random one. Otherwise, it'll get enemy waypoint by name, and that's where you pass in. It takes a starting waypoint and references its internal game object.name property. When it passes it to this other function here that I wrote, that will then search through all the waypoints that are now in the waypoints class level list here, transform list, and it'll find it and then return it back and get the index value. It actually returns back the index value within the waypoints array. Same here, so that's how it's set. So that is nice to do that either way. You just want it to go to a random waypoint in the map, it'll do it, and it will just then pick up whatever that waypoint, that waypoint then will send it to its next. It'll go on whatever that waypoint course is, how it's derived, and if we look at our waypoint controller, we assign a previous waypoint and next waypoint are copied in. Those have to be there. If they're not, it won't work. And I notice that I'm not doing any checks for that. What we need to do on this trigger enter is if previous waypoint is not equal to null and next waypoint not equal to null, then we're going to do all this code, because otherwise we don't want to do any of this. So if you leave them blank, it just won't work. You have to make sure they're set. These waypoints values have to be set in the inspector. Okay, so we'll just leave that comment there so we have it. But see, what I'd like to do, see the way it is right now, we've got these waypoint, like I said, there's waypoint paths that are set right now. It's a specific path. Once you get in, like no matter where we tell it to go, what waypoint we want it to start at in the chain of waypoints, once it gets to that waypoint, the waypoint controller takes over and then just starts navigating it in the same direction through our waypoints. So, hey y'all, get off there. Want to see your babies? Come on, go see your babies. Come on, go see your babies. They're drinking all the milk from the babies. Can't be drinking all her milk.
You sillies, you can't be drinking all her milks. I know it's good.
All right, sorry about that. I actually have two. Have two cats that were strays I took in. One they turned out to be pregnant with, baby kittens. One had her kittens before the other. But anyways, the first set that came out, the mother's weaning them cats off. They're the mother's milk, and anyways, the second, when the other cat comes out, she just had her kittens, and they're only like 2 weeks old. These older cats are trying to take that mother's milk, and so I'm having to play referee and make sure she's in the back with her smaller kittens, not letting these bigger ones, because they'll nurse everything out of her, and the other smaller kittens won't have anything. So I'm playing referee now. But anyways, I'm trying to get rid of these cats as soon as they're the first set are old enough to go. So if anyone does want a cat that's in this area in Mississippi, Meridian, Mississippi area, go ahead and send me a message on the page here. I'll contact you or send me away. I'll probably get rid of them by then. But anyway, let's not worry about that. Anyway, yeah, so I definitely need to add that in there. I just realized this checking for null waypoints was not in here. That just makes sure that it's set. But yeah, the way the waypoint system is right now, it works great for like a static route. Let's put it that way. What I consider a static route, and so what I mean by that, what do I mean by static route? Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that. If we take a look at let's turn on our editor camera so we can see. And so we have these waypoints that are set up. We go back to our waypoints here. We have these 10 waypoints. And so they're all in our scene right here. Let's go to the Y on this so we can zoom out. And so yeah, you see all these waypoints in there. It's a static route, goes around this thing, and it's defined by with each waypoint having a controller. It's really controlling the navigation of an enemy. We don't really need that, because what that means is no matter how many enemies we spawn in, once eventually they hit, like for example this point here, they're all going to go on the same path. They're going to travel around through this navigation, start going in this loop all the way through 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way through. Maybe never reaching their destination if this waypoint happened to be in its waypoint chain. Let's, for example, if we could have taken some from the original chain, and then maybe if we threw in one of these, though, once it hit this loop, I don't think it would ever get out of it. So unless it happened to cross, by chance, one on the other path. So what we need to do is we need to change this where the waypoints are actually fed into the enemy itself. And so if we want the enemy to be in a certain, this way we can configure dynamically where each enemy goes. And so we might take these sets that we've been creating, and this is what I was getting at. We'll define little waypoint paths here, and different ones that are in different areas that are small little areas that they travel through and stay confined within. And then we'll also have waypoints, a waypoint setup that will go from location A to location B. You know, a straight navigation path to there, maybe from B to C, C to D, you know, and so forth, or even C back to A, straight to A. You know, we need to create these navigation points, navigation paths, let's put it that way, and that will take us through there. So that's the first thing. And in order to do that, we're going to have to add, because we're not going to be able to, we may be dropping in waypoints that aren't numerically in order. So the sorting method we have right now that sorts, you know, these group of waypoints, it works fine when you're in a confined set like that. But when you get into the grand scheme of things, ultimately I'd like to not necessarily worry about creating all these nested categories. I'd like to have one thing that just says map waypoints and set up waypoints across the entire map, and then we can go from there where we can create, okay, we want a subset of that, which will be, you know, maybe we'll have one little ring of waypoints here in the front for an enemy to travel. It's just kind of map patrolling this area, but it can be plucked from the grand set of waypoints. And then in that waypoint group can just be plugged into and assigned to the enemy at the point when it's instantiated. We can say, okay, enemy, your navigation waypoint set is, boom, it's these over here. And also along with that we would pass it, okay, and your starting spawn location is, and that's the other thing, we would have a spawn location, one or more that would exist in and around within the navigational area that it's going to be walking. You know, we'll have, you know, at least one, definitely one, but possibly, you know, a couple different ones for variety, that spawn an enemy in a location that's still within the waypoint area it'll be traveling. But like I said, just for variety, different ones. But initially, we definitely need one though. And so the one of those, you know, spawnable locations would be passed in as a parameter to, or set on the AI enemy controller, and then it would start its navigation through that setup. So I'm probably looking at writing some custom code that will go into the AI enemy controller for navigation and work with those variables that will be passed in. So, but the way it'll work is I'll have a well, I'm trying to think, because everything can't be done through the inspector. You're not going to have, you know, like if we have, I want to spawn multiple tigers into this world. I'm not going to have 100 tiger prefabs here that are prefabbed out to spawn at the start of a certain location, like here. I want to be able to take this single prefab and just feed it in a spawn set group, and from within that group it will automatically select, if I don't specify, one of the possible spawn locations that have been set up in that spawn set. And I want it all done through code. I want to get away from what we're doing here with when we look at the enemy spawn. This was for testing. This was great. Drag it in, drop it in, drag it in, drop it in. That's fine for testing, but it's not fine for the grand scheme of things. And like, I would love to test, you know, put like 100 tigers on this map and just have them, you know, randomly spawned throughout the map, and then you have a navigational system that they're tied to in their area that confines them to that area. And you know, initially I can see once that's set, if I don't add another variable for their navigation perimeter, let's put it that way, let's call it that, you know, they could potentially follow or chase and track a player across the entire map to wherever he's going. And so, for example, if I ran into a tiger it was way over here in this area, and then he starts chasing me. You know, I have to get to the closest safe zone because I'm going to run out of sprint. That's obvious, unless I have enough, sprint regens, which is our bottled water, on me, and health kits, first aid kits. I'm going to be in some serious trouble to have to run all the way back here if this was the only safe zone, for example, at Trader's Village. So, yeah, again, there's going to be I think 2 major safe zones. This one here, and there'll be one over on this side. These other ones are not necessarily going to be safe zones. They're going to be areas you can go to, but not necessarily a safe zone. So you have to run to one or the other. Makes it a little more riskier going out here. Then maybe we'll have items that will be of more value to go out here because it's more difficult. But anyways, so what I'm getting at is I need to be able to, in order to spawn 100 plus or 1,000 tigers or 10,000 tigers throughout this map, or any kind of enemy, we're going to need to specify through scripting. We have to have a way to feed it its spawn location and what navigational track it's going to take, without doing it through the inspector here, because we can't have 1,000, like I said, 1,000 variations of the tiger here. We could, but realistically, we might only have, when I'm thinking about this, maybe a dozen to 2 dozen localized navigation paths. Like 4 up here, we already said, at Trader's Village, 1 on each side. And so I could imagine maybe 2 dozen total around the map. So we could have 2 dozen different objects of the tiger, but what happens if we get multiple enemy types? And we're going to have, like, let's say we get another enemy type, then we're going to have 2 dozens of those so that they can spawn. And so what I'd ultimately like to do, we'll group these sub waypoint systems. We'll give them a name, and we'll have a way that we can specify a name, and it'll go through and it'll get all the game objects. For example, these are the map waypoints. We'll probably tag this as map waypoints, and then we can go through and then we'll tag each of these, we call a group, a waypoint group, as a waypoint group. That'll be the tag name. And this way we can at least work out some sensible logic where we can, in code, we can say, okay, we want to find game object by name, whatever, it'll be this, waypoints. And then the next check would be, okay, using that waypoint reference we have, we want to get all the group names that are in here. And so we'll get a list. And once we have that list, then based on a value that's maybe, we choose in code for the tiger to be part of the navigational system for, let's say, the secondary waypoint group, then we can just pass in its name, the waypoint name, and it'll do a match and find that object. And then from there, we can then, get all these waypoints and build the waypoint list on the fly for that tiger based on that. Now, if he were to specify a different waypoint group, then he would get that different one in code. He'd be getting that waypoint list. And, we could also specify a starting waypoint or a random, which we have that code. We just need to look at the way that's done in the spawn location, or the enemy spawn script here, and work out the same logic. So a lot of the scripting we'll bring in, but I think we're going to have a custom navigational script for the AI enemy. It's going to change a little bit. So matter of fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, let's look at the enemy script right now. There's never going to be a random one, because in the enemy script, Spawn enemy. Oh yeah, it was in spawn enemy where it does the random stuff. But see, right now I've been assigning it, so it gets the enemy waypoint, gets that index, and then when we instantiate the enemy, we're actually setting its start destination, final destination, all that stuff based on the waypoints that were selected. So yeah, so we've got a little bit of work to do. That's what I'll be working on today. I'll do a follow-up video on that. I'm going to take a break to kind of take a high-level thought process on this and work through what we'll need to add to the AI enemy controller as public inspector variables, which actually is probably not going to be nothing because, again, I'm trying to get away from the inspect. This will be more privates. But I'm looking at adding a way to do that through code. You just set it through code. It's not going to be an inspector-based thing. So when you instantiate your enemy, you just go ahead and set certain parameters for that enemy. And then he's on his merry way after that. So that's going to be, once we get to that point, when that scripting is written and it's working, we can just, basically instantiate an enemy and, tell it where its starting spawn location is, where its navigational system is at, all that. That's really the two things we need. The health value is in fact set in the inspector. We can leave it at that because we don't really have a leveling, like a different rank or level, a higher level tiger. We only have one. And later on, even if we do get to the point where we have the tiger based on his experience while he's in the world, if he, let's say he survives and he kills a player, you know what I mean, and the player respawns somewhere else or back at his original location, the tiger remains in the game world, and so he gets experience for applying damage. We need to make our enemies get some experience as well based on that, and so they can go up in rank, which essentially would increase their maximum health. So we'll look at changing that down the road. But right now we're wanting to get this AI navigation built in and get that scripting working a little bit better. So essentially there's going to have to be a secondary function that's written, a secondary spawn enemy script essentially, or I could go into that one and modify it, but I have to be careful. I don't want to mix up that. I mean, it is nice to have just a static system that if we just want to drop it in, we know we're going to have a few enemies. For example, like a boss enemy that you know is going to be in a certain location. You're not going to be spawning bosses all over the world. Well, a static type system that we've defined where, when I say static, it's not really static, but I mean something you can set up through the inspector where you just drag and drop and build it that way would work perfectly fine for that. This also would probably work fine if we knew that tigers are only going to exist in one area. Then we can have a couple of tigers, or what we call, let me go back to the script, not a couple of tigers, but we could have a couple enemy spawns set up in here, and just set their basic, like we have their starting waypoint, their ending waypoint. And this may be, we probably could expand upon this idea because of the enemy spawn, because essentially that's how most games are going to be set up, where you're going to spawn the enemy from a location. and I'm almost thinking I might modify this. The way we could do this, and again, I'm just throwing out my first thought process here on the way I'm going to implement this off stream here, is we'll take the enemy spawn script we currently have, and instead of just instantiating no, that probably, I'm trying to think of the location we're going to instantiate it, but I forgot. This enemy spawn that we're using the transform position, that is the spawn location. So that's going to be fine. But I guess if we're going to automate some stuff, we could write a generic function that will say, let's say we just want to spawn in 10 tigers. Then we need to go ahead and create these enemy spawns. Yeah, we'd almost have to create all these enemy spawn locations on the world first, and then uncheck them and copy them over as prefabs. And if we had all our spawn locations in as prefabs, then and they're not active, which would cause the script not to actually execute yet, then we could set these properties like the waypoint, ending waypoint, and turn these options on, sprint mode, and anything else we had. We could set those in code first and do this in a generic spawn enemies script, and just have it start spawning enemies. So that may be the direction I'll go. I'll start with just spawning this one to get that working. Once that's working in that same spawn enemies function, I could add additional ones and additional spawns of tigers and just tell it to spawn it in different. But I guess the first thing, before I even move forward with that, and we need to. There's several things that need to happen. Obviously, we need to set up the entire waypoint system, get all those defined, and group them, and come up with a decent naming. So that'd be the first thing, and let's see. Now I'll tell you what. We definitely need to do that. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, because I kind of want y'all to see some of this, but I don't want to keep this stream super long. I'm going to take a break here. It's about lunchtime here, so I'll take a short break. This has been a long video, I know, of really not doing a whole lot. It's been more about discussing. We did make a few changes. We worked out a few kinks or bugs. We still had one kind of minor glitch that we sometimes you just gotta let things resolve it without worrying about it. I mean, it's not a game breaking glitch. So you're worrying about the speed of after he leaves the tracking zone of the player, getting back up to speed right away. You would think it would be a simple thing, but which it probably is. I'm just, like I said, sometimes you need to step back, and I need to take a higher level look at, the way that code is implemented, and instead of looking down on the details, and I'll probably see exactly where that needs to happen, what needs to change for it. But no, I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to work on adding our additional waypoints throughout the entire map. We want to get our waypoint system in place, get all that going. And then we're going to write some scripts that can retrieve a set of waypoints based on a name that we specify, like a waypoint name, which, like I said, will be defined under our map waypoints. Each of these will be the name, so we can pass in that name as a parameter, and it will retrieve the waypoints that are listed under it there, and also the potential spawn locations that would be set up. So what I'm thinking about doing underneath these here, we would have, this would be an empty game object, which would just be the name of the waypoint group collection. But within that collection, we'll have two other game objects, one being the waypoints, and the other being the spawn locations. And we'll tag each of those sub-game objects with an appropriate tag that indicates that they're waypoints versus spawn locations. And that way we can, when we specify, okay, we want to get the information for a particular collection of waypoints that also includes spawn locations, potential spawn locations for that enemy, we'll be able to pull it from one game object and be able to decipher easily by using a tagging, a simple tagging system. We're not going to tag. We won't have to tag each individual waypoint like this, like we did. We won't have to do that anymore because we'll just tag the group heading, the group object, the parent object with that tag, and all the children of that parent will be only our waypoints, and there'll be a game object spawn locations, and it'll only be spawn locations for that particular waypoint navigation area. If that makes sense. So that'll be the first change we'll make, and then once we have all that in place, and we'll build the code. To modify where we can, when we instantiate a tiger, we're going to create a function where we pass it the prefab enemy that we want to spawn in, and we'll pass it additional parameters in this function, which will correspond to the information we need, like the a spawn location, which will be a spawn location from name from the group of spawns that are available in that collection of waypoints. We'll pass it the starting waypoint, ending waypoint. It'll be the those are the first 4 parameters. So the prefab name of the enemy, and then its spawn location, and then the prefab, or not the prefab, but the starting ending waypoint locations. We'll pass it in stuff we're already doing, like the repeating waypoint flag, so we can tell it whether it's going to continue to loop, or if it's in case of a one-way destination from point A to point B, we wouldn't check that. And then the sprint mode, whether they're going to sprint. So we'll set all that up. So really looking at that information you see there in the spawn enemy script over here, we'll be taking basically all those become parameters to this function we're going to write. And so we'll be setting these in code, which will override anything that's set here. Well, by default, when you bring the enemy inside your, I guess we need to make sure that what's being saved in the prefab, enemy prefab. Nothing, but we don't have spawns as a prefab, so it won't matter. But we will need to create. Well, we need to create something. I guess it won't matter as long as we're overriding it. It won't matter if something is set by accident on one of these. As long as we're overriding it, that takes precedence over what's set through the inspector. So yeah, we'll work out that all functionality. What I'll probably do, let me zoom in here. We'll go ahead and set up our new waypoints for the 4 that we talked about in this area as our demonstration area to test our code, and then we'll set up some spawn locations, very random. I'll probably try to do like 3 different spawn locations on each side so that we can potentially get a random spawn. And that's probably what I'll do, is let it do a random spawn, and we'll probably let it do a random maybe a random final destination. I don't know. That could add some variety. I'm trying to think. We'll see how that goes. Initially, probably what we'll do, just to make sure it's going in a circular fashion, we'll just get one random starting point, waypoint, and we'll assign that as the ending waypoint as well, and we'll set it in a loop so we know it's. But we can randomly start them at any point within that waypoint system. But once they're spawned in, they will continue to loop through that series, and then later on we'll add in or experiment with. Okay, if we get two randoms, and we, if he starts at waypoint 3, for example, to start, the end is waypoint 7, and then say there's a total of 10. That means obviously that waypoints 1 and 2 will never be used within his navigation, which could be fine. And then let him navigate. But what I'm afraid of is potentially it gets like 2 waypoints that are close by, 4 and 5, for example, and they're close to each other. So, and he spawns at a certain location. He'll walk to 4 initially, sprint to 5, and then he's in a loop going back 5 to 4, 5 to 4, 5 to 4, 5 to 4, 5. So initially, I think because these are going to be small scale navigational areas anyways with waypoints, we'll just pick a point, an initial waypoint, assign that as the final, and make them loop through the entire waypoint group, because like I said, they are smaller and confined. And but the spawn location will vary. So if he dies, for example, when he gets respawned, he'll get respawned potentially at one of 3 spawn locations before he starts, the navigation again. And again, he'll get a new starting. Each time he's respawned, he gets, it'll be a new starting waypoint, which will become the ending waypoint, and it'll go in that loop until he encounters a human that tries to kill him. Now, this way we'll have 4 tigers out this way. I also want to add in. This is what we'll be working on, is adding in a respawn timer now, similar to the way we implemented stuff for the items that spawn and despawn. But in this case, we're not going to despawn a tiger until he dies. Really, he's going to die at that point. He'll be despawned. That's when we'll actually kick off. The next spawn timer will be now that variable could be set as a public inspector variable, which would be the frequency. How often would they be spawned? And the spawn frequency would just be a value in seconds, and it would be okay. So, and that's utilized when he dies. When he dies, then there's a counter that goes, and when once that duration of time passes, another tiger will respawn. We could set it at a low value; it would almost instantly respawn, or we could set it at a longer value to have a delay to make it more dynamic that way. Ultimately, I'd almost like to, if a value is not set on that, we'll make it where it could be a random value between a min and a max. Like for example, 5 to 60. So anywhere between 5 seconds and 60 seconds. Again, I don't like to instantly respond stuff right away. I like to set up timers and have a 5-second delay, just and not to overload anything while all that's going on. So, yeah, that could work. So there's some ideas there. That's what we're going to work toward. So let's go ahead and so we don't get off topic here too much. What I just told you we're going to be working on next. Let's go ahead and jot that out real quick. So the first thing you want to do is set up, well, let's just say organize waypoints. Organize all waypoints in a main group group and call it subgroups. Which are collections 2. we want to we actually want to add 3 possible spawn locations of enemy within a waypoint subgroup. Okay, so once we define those, then we want to write function to retrieve spawn possible enemy spawn locations and waypoint collection. Write function to spawn an enemy by passing an enemy prefab, spawn location, start waypoint, end waypoint, repeat waypoint, which is our bool, and sprint mode. Okay, so once we do that, and again, this functionality will exist in I actually want to keep it separate from, I think, the other spawn enemy, because that can be used in our like I said, someone that just wants to set something up, or if we want to set it up through the basic Unity editor, we can do that and just drop in game objects and do all that kind of statically that way, predefined. But if we want something a little bit more dynamic in code, I think all these need to exist in the AI enemy controller script, or we build another called AI enemy navigation. That's what we'll call it. AI enemy navigation, maybe, or AI enemy waypoints. Something for that. Yeah, so we'll add that to that script. Same with this. And last thing, test new function by spawning multiple tigers in game world. So we'll actually test that with multiple, because that would be nice, especially if we're gonna set up our player where he'll get experience points and all that based on him killing the tiger. And I think I already did that actually. Let's take a look at what happens when we kill the enemy real quick. Let's if it's is dead, do this thing and any dead code, destroy this game object. I don't know. We're still giving away our free stuff. So let's go to our player manager. No more free stuff. We got to get to the point where, yeah, this free crap here, no more. Okay, so we just changed that, so we're no longer getting free stuff. What I want to do is make sure that we are getting some experience from our tiger, and also that the tiger drops some kind of gold, you know, that we would have to pick up. And so yeah, it's staying at 0 and 0. That's what I wanted to make sure. Our rank and all that, we're all at 0. I mean, he's still walking. Yeah, so that's good there. Let's go ahead and stop this. I'm going to end the stream at this right here. Thanks again for stopping out. And like I said, we'll pick up in a little bit. I'm going to take a short break, grab some lunch. We've got our list of chores, things we need to do here, our to-dos. Let's save that to, I'm going to save it to the desktop, so we'll have it. This is going to be for stream. We're actually in stream 23 now, but this will be stream 24 to do. Let's say to-do list. So we've got that saved in case I accidentally close it. So that's what we'll be working on. Hopefully y'all can see this. Matter of fact, let's bring up that font just a little bit. There's a sense in having it. That probably read it better that way. Let's do a 24. 24 is good. We've got our, let's expand that out. All right. So if we want to add stuff to it, we can. But so at each stream, I'll this might be a good thing we can start doing is at the beginning of each stream, we'll write out some things that we want to accomplish, or maybe it's something I can get ready beforehand, and we'll just show, okay, this is what we're going to be doing this stream. These are going to be the things we need to modify and the next phase of this, and of course we can add to it. But if we get something done fairly quickly, maybe not. Maybe we'll end the stream at that point. When we finish that, that's it. The stream's over. But I'll try to make sure it's something that's going to at least be, we'll have a 30-minute stream. Like I said, I really wanted to keep these streams less than an hour because, if someone's looking for some information on how to do a certain thing, it's hard to see when you're having to go through a 3-hour stream where we did a little bit here, a little bit there, and we talked a lot, and this, for the folks that are trying to just get the information quickly, you're not going to do it. I guess there's tutorials out there for that. And if you had something you wanted me to do, a quick tutorial on something, I mean, maybe I could start working on some of that. But this is really turning really like a documentary of my progress in making this game. So that's why you're going to have all this extra information, this extra video. It's not just a clear cut, okay, we're working on this, we're coding this, working this, coding this, working this. This is how you do that. This is a game that's being developed over time, and this is showing you the reality of making a game. You're not going to just be writing code all the time. There's going to be some thought process. There's going to be some bugs you're working on. There's going to be some things you encounter that you, okay, wait a minute, I need to add this, I need to add that you encounter that weren't in your initial thought process or design. Even if you have it written out, there's going to be some things you'll encounter that, now when you've done this more than once, like these types of games or a certain type of thing, you've done it more than once, and you already know, okay, I'm going to need all these things, and you'll start coding from the get-go. You'll start writing out, and that's why you'll see some people that will go ahead and write out all this stuff right away. They've already done that for a while, or they're reading it from script they've already written. They've already written the code for it, got it working, and then they're doing their tutorial videos. They're reading off some document they have and just typing all that in off of what's already a functional version of the code to make it appear like they're just doing it off the cuff, off the top of their head, like that. And there are some people that probably could do a lot of that off the top of their head, but it takes many years of experience to get to that point. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked again. Let's end it at this. We'll leave this up here. This will be where we're going to return, and we'll go from there. So thanks again. See you soon.